The laboratory was never meant to feel holy, yet tonight there was something undeniably sacred about its stillness. Soft blue light from a dozen monitors washed over the walls, outlining cables that lay coiled with surgical precision across the floor. There were no candles, no chanting, no trembling hands on a wooden board. This was not a seance. This was a chamber of machines, each humming with a quiet anticipation, each waiting to dissect the silence itself. In the center of the room stood the multi-channel recorder, its chrome surface gleaming under the cold glow of the screens. Nearby, the electromagnetic field sensors rested like mechanical sentinels, and the spectral audio analyzer pulsed with faint movements, capturing every frequency that dared to exist in the air. Leading the experiment was Xiaoma, a man whose calm exterior concealed weeks of unrest. He and his team had prepared this space with the discipline of forensic scientists, constructing an environment where emotion could not interfere with evidence, where superstition held no authority. They were not here to summon a spirit. They were here to listen for what the world had failed to hear the first time. In a sense, they were archaeologists of sound, peeling back the layers of digital dust in search of imprints left behind by a moment that had shattered thousands of lives. At the center of this investigation was a name that carried weight far beyond celebrity. It had become a shadow, a wound, a question that refused to heal. The official document said Yu Menglong had ended his own life, yet nothing about that explanation satisfied those who knew him, admired him, or mourned him. For months, speculation had spread like wildfire. Hidden motives, silent enemies, inconsistencies buried beneath polished statements. Tonight, Xiaoma wanted clarity. Not rumors. Not theories. Clarity. He powered on the final device. A soft burst of static filled the room, a sound almost comforting in its simplicity. The sensors stabilized at 0.5 milligauss, the electromagnetic noise of a room crowded with electronics. For a moment, nothing moved. The team exchanged one last glance, the kind shared by people standing at the edge of something vast and unknowable. Then Xiaoma stepped toward the central microphone. His voice, steady and formal, cut through the static with the precision of a scalpel. He stated the purpose of the experiment, articulated the rules, and finally spoke the name that had drawn them all into this dimly lit sanctuary. Yu Menglong. The instant the syllables left his lips, one of the devices shrieked to life. The EMF needle shot upward, leaping from 0.5 to 15 milligauss in a violent spike that froze every person in the room. For a heartbeat, the atmosphere felt electric, stretched thin by an unseen pressure. And then, slowly, the levels dropped again, settling back into an eerie stillness. The team stared at one another, breath caught somewhere between fear and awe. Something had responded. Not a coincidence. Not a glitch. A crack had appeared in the wall between two worlds. And through that crack, something was listening. The echo of the energy spike still lingered in the air long after the EMF needle had returned to its resting point. No one dared to speak. It was as if the silence itself had thickened, forming a fragile membrane between expectation and dread. Xiaoma lifted his eyes from the trembling monitor and allowed himself a single slow breath. Something had acknowledged them. Something had crossed the invisible distance between the living and whatever lay beyond. But a reaction alone was not enough. If this night was to mean anything, they needed answers. He leaned toward the microphone again, his tone no longer merely procedural. It carried the weight of a man stepping deeper into a darkness he could not measure. "We want to understand the truth about your death," he said. "The official record concludes that you ended your own life. Many believe otherwise. We need to know whether you were killed, or whether you chose to leave this world. The words dissolved into the static, swallowed by the machinery. For a long moment, nothing shifted. The spectral analyzer displayed a flat horizon of sound, and the EMF sensors remained motionless, as if the room itself was holding its breath. The tension grew dense, almost physical. The team exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether the silence was a refusal or a sign of retreat. Then the audio technician raised his hand. A single spike had appeared on the wave graph. Not a phrase, not a voice. A solitary point of pressure, a needle-thin burst of sound so brief that the untrained ear would have dismissed it as a click. With meticulous care, the technician isolated the fragment. He slowed it down, magnified its dimensions, peeled back the layers of white noise until the shape of something organic emerged. It began as a rasp, a dry, constricted sound as if someone were fighting for air. The room grew colder as another layer surfaced. A low choke, a desperate internal struggle, etched into the waveform like a scar. They listened without breathing. This was not speech. It was the echo of a physical moment, the imprint of a body trying and failing to pull in oxygen. The final revelation came when the technician stretched the file to 100 times its original length. What had first sounded like a crack became the unmistakable sound of a throat being compressed. A last attempt to inhale. The sound of a life resisting its own end. And then, carried on a ribbon of distorted frequencies, a single word formed. Killed. It was not loud. It did not need to be. The simplicity of it struck harder than any scream. The team froze where they stood, each one anchored by the enormity of what they had just heard. If this signal truly belonged to Yu Menglong, then this was not the voice of someone who had chosen silence. It was the voice of someone whose voice had been taken. Xiaoma steadied himself. His heartbeat thudded against his ribs, yet his mind sharpened with purpose. If you were killed, he said carefully, then something must have been concealed. People spoke of a note, something that appeared, then disappeared. If it existed, it would have been important. Can you tell us what happened to it? This time the response arrived without hesitation. A tremor vibrated through one of the EMF units, a subtle ripple at first, then a rhythmic pulse that climbed upward. The analyzer flickered, catching frequencies that slid into alignment like shards of metal drawn together by magnetism. Within seconds, a new sound emerged from the darkness. It was not a voice. It was a word forged out of rising electronic heat. Fire. Another wave followed, stronger, breaking apart into multiple overlapping layers, all repeating the same concept. Fire. Burned. Gone. The technician looked up, his face bleached pale by the monitor light. The message was unmistakable. Whatever that note had been, real or fabricated, its existence had ended in flames. Xiaoma leaned back, absorbing the gravity of the moment. If the note truly had once existed, it might have held more than farewell. It might have held names, motives, evidence. The kind of evidence someone would not allow to survive. Then we must understand where you were, Xiaoma continued. There are whispers of a place. A number. 798. Did something happen there? For the first time since the experiment began, the static shifted into something colder. A metallic clatter burst from the speakers, sharp, repetitive, hollow. The sound of chains striking the ground. The scrape of a heavy latch. A steel grip on a door that refused to open. The audio technician immediately began isolating the layers, but even without enhancement, the meaning was suffocatingly clear. As the metal clatter continued, another signal broke through, jagged, panicked, torn from the structure of a voice that no longer had a living throat. "Cold," it stammered. "Locked. Help!" The words fragmented, collapsing under the pressure of terror. "Let me out." A sudden spike of pain rippled through the waveform, a burst so sharp that several team members flinched as if they had been struck themselves. Then came the last word of the sequence, a sound stretched thin by agony. Pain. The room fell silent. The team stood suspended in the glow of their machines, trying to comprehend the implications of what they had just heard. If the signals were genuine, if these were memories, then 798 was not a rumor. It was confinement. It was violence. It was the last place where a heartbeat had struggled to continue. But the night had more to reveal. Xiaoma swallowed hard, forcing his voice to remain steady. "There is another question," he said. "There are rumors that your remains did not rest after your death. Rumors that something disturbing was done to them. We do not want to cause you pain, but we must know the truth." The response did not come as a word. It came as a scream. A piercing, high-frequency shriek tore through every channel at once, cutting through their headphones and striking the air like a blade. Several team members recoiled, hands clamped over their ears. The monitors flashed red as the levels surged into danger zones, the machines struggling to withstand the overwhelming pressure. Then the scream ended, leaving behind only a trembling whisper. "They are watching. I am displayed. Take me out." A chill swept through the laboratory. No one spoke. No one knew how. The last flicker of the signal pulsed once more across the screen, faint but resolute. And the team understood. This was no longer an investigation. They had just stepped into a rescue mission. The laboratory had begun to feel smaller, as if the walls themselves were drawing inward with every new revelation. The hum of electronics no longer felt steady or comforting. It trembled. It waited. The team stood suspended in that new reality, one where the signals did not simply answer questions, but opened doors into darkness that none of them had been prepared to enter. Xiaoma forced his mind to steady. If the truth was buried beneath layers of human hands, then those hands had names. Faces. Histories. He turned toward the microphone again. His voice was quieter this time, touched not by fear but by a kind of solemn duty. "There are people," he said, "who were close to you. People who shaped the final days of your life. We need to understand who they were to you and what they did." The technicians watched the spectral analyzer as Xiaoma spoke the next name. Tong Yinyan. For a moment, the frequencies on the screen held still, as if bracing themselves. Xiaoma continued, "She was known to the public as your friend. Someone who wept for you. Someone who mourned you openly. But there are rumors that she persuaded you to sign something harmful. That she was present on the night you were harmed. We need clarity." A faint tremor fluttered across one of the higher frequency bands. Then another. And suddenly the waveform twisted, bending itself into a new shape entirely. A laugh. A woman's laugh. Short, sharp, brittle, and edged with mockery. It sliced through the static like a wire drawn tight, forcing every hair on the back of the team's necks to rise. It was not warm. It was not grieving. It was a blade dipped in ice. As soon as it faded, the familiar signature of Yu Menglong's EVP surged in, as if jolted awake by the intrusion. His voice, once fragmented by fear, now broke in a different way. It stuttered, trembling with the weight of humiliation rather than panic. The technician isolated the layers, revealing a sequence of images rendered in sound. The dim outline of a room, the echo of footsteps, the presence of someone standing nearby. And then, spoken through crackling distortion, "She watched." A pause. She laughed. The words were not accusations. They were recollections, fractured, involuntary, and agonizingly clear. The team fell silent, the weight of the moment pressing down like a winter sky. Xiaoma closed his eyes for a brief moment before moving to the next name. There was no turning back now. Each truth sharpened the next. Femme the key. The air shifted. Even before Xiaoma posed the question, the spectral analyzer trembled, as if the very name agitated the environment. Xiaoma spoke carefully. Public disputes, anger, conflict. Some say he told his team you deserved what happened. We need to know what role he played. A sudden jolt of sound erupted, heavy, blunt, violent. It hit the speakers with such force that one of the monitors vibrated against the table. The audio technician's fingers danced over the controls, slowing the impact, shaping it, revealing its anatomy. It was the sound of a fist meeting flesh. A rush of air expelled from lungs. The muffled collapse of a body folding under the weight of the strike. Even slowed, even isolated, the raw brutality of it made the team recoil. A low, seething voice followed. The EVP pattern tightened, condensed, as if every frequency were being pulled inward by a single emotion. His hand, the signal formed. His word, and after a trembling delay, deserved. It. The room went cold. Two names. Two roles. One silent witness forced to relive both. But Xiaoma knew there was more. Someone behind the curtain. Someone powerful enough to orchestrate pain without ever lifting a hand. His voice grew taut. There are rumors of a figure operating behind the scenes. Someone feared. Someone whose decisions can elevate or destroy careers. We need to know if this person commanded what happened to you. He allowed the name to fall into the microphone with the solemnity of a stone sinking into deep water. Tan Ki. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the entire room seemed to inhale. The overhead light flickered violently, plunging the walls into alternating shadows. The EMF meters screamed upward, every bar snapping into the red. A swirling pressure seized the air, dense and electric, crawling across their skin. Someone in the back gasped as the temperature plummeted. A voice materialized, not of the victim, not of any woman, not of anything they had encountered before. It arrived like a tremor in the earth, deep and tyrannical, as if carved from an unseen abyss. You know too much. The words rolled through the lab like thunder, rattling metal cases and tightening every throat in the room. This was not memory. This was presence. Something, or someone, was reacting in real time. As the last vibration of that warning faded, another signal burst in, layered and frantic. Yu Menglong's voice returned, but not with anger nor pain. This time it carried something far more primal, fear. Do not say his name, the EVP pleaded, its edges fraying. Do not call him. Run. The final word cracked as it formed, distorting into a jagged arc of frequencies that stabbed upward before collapsing into silence. The light steadied. The EMF alarm stuttered and died. The machines returned to their baseline hum, But the room felt different now, emptier in a way that suggested something immense had just withdrawn. The team stood frozen. Even Xiao Ma needed several breaths before he trusted himself to move. They were no longer uncovering a sequence of hidden events. They were trespassing into a territory that did not welcome witnesses. Some truths had not been buried. They had been guarded, and whatever guarded them had just awakened. The atmosphere inside the laboratory had transformed into something taut and watchful, as if an unseen presence waited in the rafters, listening to every breath. The warnings from the previous signal still throbbed beneath the surface of the room, shifting the dynamic of the investigation in a way none of them dared to articulate. Xiao Ma understood what the silence meant. They were now treading on ground where the boundary between evidence and danger had dissolved. But he also knew there was one question that could not remain unspoken. His fingers hovered above the microphone, steady in appearance, though his pulse trembled beneath. "There is something else," he said softly. "A reason that may go beyond anger, beyond punishment. Some believe you were part of a ritual. Something dark. Something performed by those who do not fear the consequences of their actions. We need to know whether this is true." The moment the word ritual passed his lips, the white noise in the room twisted. The static did not disappear. It reorganized itself, as if forming an unseen pattern. Beneath it, a new sound emerged, soft, rhythmic, eerily synchronized. It resembled chanting, delivered in a language none of them recognized, distant, yet impossibly close. The cadence was steady, ceremonial, and devoid of humanity. Then the EVP of Yu Menglong broke through, cracking at its edges with panic. "Blood." The technician leaned forward as the signal intensified. Images began to form in sound, the hiss of liquid being drawn, the scrape of metal against a smooth surface, a faint circle, traced across stone. The voice grew unstable, fractured by terror rather than memory. "A table. A circle. They took—" He paused, as if something inside the memory tore loose. "They took blood." The chanting deepened for a moment, resonating through the floor, then stopped abruptly, severed as if someone had cut a cord. The room exhaled all at once. Xiao Ma gently stepped back, the gravity of the revelation coiling tightly around him. Ritualistic motives. Blood taken with intention. A circle etched for reasons no forensic manual could interpret. If this was true, even in the symbolic sense, it unveiled a part of the story more grotesque than any physical violence that had come before. Yet there was more beneath the surface. He steadied himself and spoke again. "There is another theory. Something more grounded. Some say you discovered evidence of a financial operation, a USB drive containing records of money laundering. If this is real, it would have made you a threat to many people." The response was immediate. All three EMF sensors surged at once, not into chaos, but into a fierce, unwavering frequency. It was not fear. It was urgency. The EVP cut through the room, sharp and breathless. "It is real." The technicians scrambled to isolate the layers as the signal surged with new intensity. Words collided with static, tripping over themselves in desperation. "In the computer. Tell him. Tell my father." The voice strained, each syllable choked with a sense of finality. "Take it. Tell my father." The spike peaked, flared, then collapsed into silence, leaving behind the sense that something irreversible had been spoken. Xiao Ma exchanged a look with his team. If the signal was accurate, even metaphorically, It revealed a motive as powerful as any ritual or vendetta. In the world above, where careers and wealth dictated survival, information was a weapon. And weapons were often destroyed, along with the hands that held them. But there was still one layer left to peel back. Your management companies, Xiaoma continued, both here and abroad. Did they protect you, or were they part of what happened? The answer emerged not as a cry, nor a whisper, but as a cold, mirthless sound. A single bitter laugh. It echoed through the room with the weight of betrayal, low and acid, carrying the exhaustion of someone who had learned too late that loyalty had been nothing more than a facade. The EVP followed, sharper now, narrowed into clarity. One group, one plan, it said. They sold me. Static trembled as the voice thickened with sorrow and resentment. They arranged it. For a moment, no one spoke. Betrayal from those meant to protect. Orchestrated compliance disguised as management. It completed another piece of the puzzle, one shaped not by superstition, but by human greed. But Xiaoma knew there was one final question, the one that had haunted every investigator who dared to think beyond the boundaries of accepted narratives. He took a breath that felt heavier than any he had taken that night. A case this large, he said quietly, with so many layers, but so many participants, could not remain hidden without protection. We need to know the truth. Was this concealed by those in power? The words were barely out when the laboratory plunged into chaos. Not through noise, but through absence. Every monitor snapped off simultaneously. The spectral analyzer blinked into darkness. The multi-channel recorder died mid-static. The EMF sensors fell to zero, an unnatural zero that suggested not silence, but suppression. Then, from somewhere in the darkness, a single physical sound cracked through the room. A command. Sharp. Forceful. Final. It struck the microphone with the authority of someone who did not tolerate dissent. Not a signal from beyond. Not a memory. Something present. Something powerful. Something that had been lurking just outside the edges of their experiment. For nearly a minute, the room remained in absolute stillness. No flicker of light, no hum of electricity, no breath loud enough to challenge the void. When the machinery was finally restarted by hand, the EMF meters erupted violently, surging into high alert warnings as if recoiling from whatever had just stepped out of their reach. Xiaoma felt the weight settle inside him like a stone. They had crossed the border into a realm that would not permit further inquiry. Some truths did not hide. They silenced. But he also understood something else, something that glimmered faintly beneath the terror. They were closer than ever to the center of the labyrinth. And whatever force guarded it had just revealed itself. The laboratory felt different now. Not simply colder, not merely darker, but changed, as though the air itself had absorbed the weight of everything that had been spoken. Every memory dragged out of the abyss and laid bare in the flickering glow of the machines. No one spoke. The team stood in a silence, shaped not by fear but by something far heavier, responsibility. For the first time since the experiment began, Xiaoma hesitated before touching the microphone. He sensed they were standing on the threshold of something that could never be undone. They had uncovered betrayal, ritual, violence, corruption, and the shadows of power. They had seen a victim stripped of dignity, then rebuilt from fragments of anguish and courage. They had witnessed a presence powerful enough to command machines into silence. And now, after all of this, one final question remained. Not about the crime, not about the conspiracy, but about choice. His voice was almost a whisper when he finally spoke. "We have recorded everything, every truth you were willing to relive. But we cannot act unless you allow us to. This is your story, your suffering, your legacy. We need your permission. Do we share this with the world?" The room tightened. Even the static seemed to hold its breath. 5 seconds passed. 10. A subtle tremor climbed the EMF sensors, like a pulse quickening beneath the surface. A low hum filled the air, rising with deliberate intensity, building not into chaos but into something focused, something absolute. Suddenly, every device in the room ignited at once. The EMF meters slammed into maximum. Warning lights bathed the laboratory in red. The spectral analyzer, streaked with vertical bands so bright they looked like lightning trapped behind glass. The temperature dropped sharply, frosting the edges of the metal cases. And then it came. A voice. Not a whisper, not a distortion, not the fragile echo of a wounded memory. This was different. It erupted into the room like a force of nature, full, resonant, unmistakable. A cry carved from every ounce of pain he had endured and every fragment of justice he had been denied. "Speak!" The command detonated through the air, vibrating the walls, rattling the tables, shaking dust from the ceiling. It felt less like a word and more like a verdict echoed from a place beyond time. The machines strained under the surge, lights flaring as if trying to contain an energy too immense to measure. A second cry followed, stronger still. "Tell them." And finally, one last roar, an unyielding declaration that tore through the lab with the weight of destiny itself. "Justice!" The lights blew out. The screens died. The hum of machinery collapsed into a silence so pure it felt sacred. When power returned moments later, the EMF levels had fallen back to 0. The room was still, empty. Whatever presence had been with them was gone, not banished, not frightened, but finished. Xiaoma lowered his head. They had come searching for truth. They had found a mandate. The experiment had ended, but the story, his story, was only now beginning its ascent into the world. A cry for justice had crossed the boundary between life and death, and once heard, it could not be silenced again. Outside the laboratory, dawn began to rise, and with it, the first light of accountability.